Good morning, Jaz and Ed. Lovely to meet you. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. But firstly, would you people won't know you particularly, so do you want to introduce yourself? Jaz, would you like to start first?
Yeah, I'm Jaz, and I am one half of Human First Limited, which is a company which looks at how you can lead people by knowing yourself and leading yourself well. It's all about connection and engagement in order to grow that kind of autonomy and innovation within a company.
Brilliant. Ed?
Yes, I'm the other half, Ed Ampaw-Farr. We work together, as you say, the human first leadership space. And yeah, we're passionate about leadership and understanding what that leadership is, but more importantly, authentic leadership. And that's kind of why we've come together to form this company. And we're here to try and make a difference in that leadership space.
Yeah.
And look, and that's what I want to explore, is how you view leadership in the modern world. Because it's changing at speed, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think people are struggling. And one of the questions, Jaz, you asked this week is, do most leaders understand how they come across to their people? I suppose the question is, do they?
Well, that's the worst thing. And I have a theory that has been played out several times, that the further you go in your leadership, the harder it is for you to understand what it's like on the other side of you in a real way, because people tend to agree more, and you're surrounded by people who are thinking and doing the same as you. So when you've got a whole team of diverse people with cognitive diversity coming from different places, there's always understanding. And the number one reason that people leave and cite as leaving is the relationships and not feeling seen or valued or heard. And that feels very touchy-feely when you're working hard and doing the right thing as a leader. Why do we also need to ask people how their rollerblading habit is going? It feels kind of like, but actually it's about this way of being that allows you to get everybody on side, on the same page, but by doing that, by actually paying into their emotional bank account as well, in an authentic and consistent and way that has high expectations embedded in it. So it's still leadership, but it's leadership with an EQ as well as IQ feel to it. And I personally, I know I have to work harder and harder. The more I became a leader, the more responsibility I had, the more people I had to work harder and harder at connecting. Because leadership is it's a bit of a rubbish job, really. You have to trust others implicitly, but you have to earn their trust. I mean, it's an inconvenience. That's why you get paid more. So it's navigating that journey of really being able to get to the point where people are saying, best boss I've ever worked for, I'd work for you if I didn't get paid. That doesn't happen if you sit on your boardroom and cross your fingers and hope for the best. So yeah, I think the further you go, the more difficult it is. Would you say, Ed?
Yes, no, totally agree. And it's a lonely place. I think that's what needs to be called up straight away. To Jaz's point, as you go up in the chain of whether it's a corporation or running your own business, a lot of it becomes making a lot of decisions where you think, I've got to have the right answer.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening is, and I'm really excited about this in one way, but also it was going to shake leadership up. In the modern world, people are very much all about what's the purpose of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
As a leader let's say in the days gone by, you did a lot of management rather than leading. And what I mean by that is a manager basically has authority and a leader has responsibility. So in effect, in times gone by, a leader could say, this is where we're going, it's my vision, and this is where we're going to do. And everyone will say, well, okay, you're the boss, and therefore it's your vision, and we're going to follow you. As we're moving into the modern era, what's happening is, and the next generations are saying, well, what's the purpose? So do I really want to follow your vision? And where the dichotomy or the crossroad is happening in our minds is this: as a leader, it is still your vision. Whether you're running the company or you're the head VP or CEO, whatever you are, you've come into a position and you're saying, this is the direction I think we should go. By not understanding the people who, in theory, should be following you, i.e. you want to get them to follow you, you can't instruct them. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is, if you don't understand them, then unfortunately the way you put your vision across, they don't follow. And we talk about this a lot, you get compliance rather than collaboration, or I want to follow your vision. And that's becoming harder and harder in the modern world, because people are saying, what's the purpose of your vision? So in a way, it becomes a challenge for a leader to say, actually, how am I coming across? And to Jaz's point right at the beginning, what type of leader am I? And then the EQ comes into play, knowing who you are and how you lead. I don't know if that's kind of giving some clarity around that.
Yeah, it leads into the problem that a lot of companies are facing today, aren't there? Because actually in many companies, particularly with the return to work, have felt a disconnect with their own people. And actually that disconnect can be built up over a whole range of years, because it's probably exactly because of what you're saying there, Ed, isn't it? That people want something different.
Yeah.
So are you seeing a change? Are you seeing companies now begin to change, begin to understand this change?
I've seen some interesting changes, and I think I'm really big on people aren't often lying awake at night thinking, how can I annoy the people who work for me? That's not happening. I know that might be a narrative that some people feel is happening, but what's also possible is that I'm trying to do my best, and I haven't quite got all of the data that gives me that information. Data being where people are, what's in it for them, what they feel about where they're being led. So I had two companies during lockdown. One of them had brought out enforced yoga and actually called it enforced yoga at 1:30 on a Thursday for well-being. And that has come from a really good place of people saying, look, we're really struggling with, it's like, well, you know what, yoga is good, so we're all going to do it at 1:30. But the fact that it's enforced yoga kind of, it's the sort of thing you would do perhaps in prison, I don't know, but it's a good idea, but it's delivered in a way that isn't great. Another company asked me if I would be willing to help them appear more authentic. And I said, yep, you can. I don't have to leave. I don't have to get dressed to do that. You can just be more authentic. And they said, yeah, I know that's a way, but is there a way that we can appear more authentic to our teams? And that's like trying to do the knowledge in London to be a cab driver when you're dyslexic. You're using so many more tools and energy and focus to achieve something, which if you focused on a way of decoding would come a lot easier. So it's not about people doing more. It's about people being able to be professionally vulnerable and personally authentic at the same time, not the other way around.
That's quite frightening, isn't it?
It is frightening. It is frightening, except for we are all experts at being human. And what we've learned is to be professional first and human somewhere 277th, because we feel like, if we do anything else, then we're coming across as not professional. And that's a historical thing. And it is frightening. I appreciate that. But also it's about reconnecting with why you started the role of leader in the first place and what you want to achieve. It's actually the key that opens the doors to the blockages. Like everything you want as a leader is on the other side of a 10-minute courageous conversation. It's just sometimes that conversation is with yourself. So the tools that Ed and I use help you to unlock those doors in a way that isn't terrifying you. And so the change I've seen is when people are just like, 10% braver than they were the day before, when they're ready to swap that kind of criticism or fear or judgment for curiosity, that's when ground is really broken quite quickly, because it's allowing people to stand on who they are and not who the world or the organization has said that they should be in days gone by. Especially, I know I said before, but with the whole intergenerational aspect, this is like, it is the secret sauce of being able to bring everyone alongside. So, and because people in leadership are innovative, they haven't got there because they were like, sat there thinking, what should I do next? Oh, look, there's this job. Here I am. They've worked. They have found ways of navigating chaos. They have this amazing, and that's what I'm really frustrated about. They have this amazing talent and ability to stand at the heart of change and lead through it. Now is the time to encourage people to embrace that in a new digital age, rather than say, oh, well, I'm a dinosaur, or oh, it's not for me anymore. No, it is. We need you more than ever, but we also need that kind of connect shift. And that's what we help people do.
And do you think, so what I'm picking up from what you're saying, Jaz, is at that point, and this is where I think there's a sea change, because as a leader, as you said, they've got there by being innovative, forward thinking, resourceful, and that's all brilliant when it's external to them. Now, this is all that innovation and bravery needs to be turned inward to understand who they are as a leader. And that I'm seeing is where a number of leaders are scared, because actually, if that doesn't happen, that's a first step to not connecting with the people who you are leading. And that, I think, is where it's almost been forced at the moment, because because like we said, the great resignation, people are after purpose. They're saying, well, who are you as my leader? Do you really understand me? And in a way, if the leader doesn't understand themselves, that's the starting point for actually we've got a disconnect.
Okay, but being controversial and
Go.
not wanting to go into politics.
Yeah.
One can argue Boris is very authentic.
Oh yes, here's the thing. Oh no,
and yet everyone is saying what a horrible. You should go.
No. Well, you could argue that he is authentic, but here's my thing, and it kind of I kind of brought this up with Donald Trump. Authenticity is beautiful, and everybody thinks authenticity is the key thing that we should be putting across. But the very thing that makes authenticity attractive to people is the element of vulnerability included within it. So Donald Trump, totally authentic, never claimed to be a fan of disabled people or LGBTQ, never said that. So none of it, he was totally authentic all the time, lacked any vulnerability whatsoever. Lacked it. And when people lock down, I know in politics there's a whole thing around, I think when some senior civil servant resigned, she mentioned in a letter, I know that saying sorry is the death knell in politics, and there is something around not being able to apologize, which I think is detrimental to everybody involved. But there's something around being able for people to see your vulnerability in a professional sense, or humanity in a professional sense, that allows them to stand with you regardless. Especially in Britain, there's a moment where an underdog will all root for you, but the moment that you start winning, we'll start looking to take you down. So, and in leadership as well, it's like, if you are not at that critical moment, like in a marble run where the marble can go one way or another, if you aren't in the right place at that critical moment, if you aren't able to say, you know what, humanity, I'm a human, this is what it looks like, and here's how I'll fight for you, that's where things change. And I saw David Cameron do, I remember him doing this when he was talking about child benefit being stopped. If kids weren't going to school, the parents were going to be charged. And he'd been asked this, and it was around the time of when we were first talking about having an election where people came on and debated with each other. He wasn't keen on that. He said he was, leading the country. I hadn't got time to argue about leading the country. So he was under a lot of pressure. And there's one interview where someone said to him, what do you think about, finding parents? And he suddenly, you could see his whole demeanor change. It was just like, for the love inside. Oh, God. And he said, look, you and I both know that the best place for kids is school. And if their parents aren't going to get them there, then they've got to face the consequences. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was the moment. That was the moment to say, you and I both know the best place for kids is school. And I'm going to do my part by providing the best teachers and the best resources and the best training. And what I want is, if you are a parent who wants something better for your child than you had for yourself, then join me. Do everything you can to get your child to school. And if you're struggling, get help, because we are going to provide the best education system the world has ever seen. Do you know what I mean? That's enrolling, but it takes so much energy and focus to know how you come across. It's like being present the whole time. It's hard. It is hard. So having tools to enable you to do that means that you almost have a hope switch, something that you can go, actually, this is what people need to hear from me. This is how they need to hear it from you. It's not thinking about what you're doing. It's not your to-do list. It's your to-be list at that moment that should kick in. So yeah, the authenticity is beautiful, but if there's no vulnerability underneath it, people can see it and smell it and taste it a mile off, and you lose them.
I'd add more to that as well. With the authenticity, is 100% the right thing, and as you say, many leaders have said and act authentic. But with that also comes the vulnerability, to Jaz's point, and there's one word: integrity. If you put those three words together for a leader, and they live and drive and deliver on that at any given stage, all the people that follow them will continue to follow them, even if they get it wrong.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Right, two comments, I think, just to challenge that. Firstly, a lot of leaders will say actually they became less popular the more competent they became.
Yeah.
They were the most successful when they were actually the least competent.
Yeah.
So that kind of goes against the bit, doesn't it?
Well, that's the underdog thing. We'll support
and
you.
The other
you
thing
look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and the other piece, yeah. But that goes back to the Tony Blair bit, is actually his popularity when he was least competent. And the more competent he became, the least popular he became. And the other piece about this is about alpha behaviors, isn't it? Because the vulnerability goes against the alpha culture. And a lot of the last decade has been dominated by alphaness. Particularly, it's all been how much profit do we make? How successful are we? How much wealth have we got? It hasn't been about social purpose, which is the reason why you're seeing that shift back now, because people want something deeper. than that traditional alpha. And actually, when you talk to often leaders from, who were my clients when I started off the year before, actually they were much more human and had more purpose than a lot of people in the last decade.
Yeah.
So the last decade actually has been a real problem area, I think. So how do we get to me there's lots of pushback against alpha. Sorry.
Ed's good at this, but let me jump in with my little bit first. I don't think there's any, there's no need to not be alpha. I think we need alpha, and I think it's important. And alpha is all about how do we win. It's not how do I win, it's how do we win in what we're doing. And what we're talking about now is how you win. I mean, we're in the business of helping people win. So I think sometimes people feel they've got to do less or turn the volume down on themselves or be different. It's like, no. We have to make sure that people hear, see, taste, feel, smell what you're saying. The problem isn't in you being competent, or the problem isn't in you being intelligent. Alpha is not a problem. It's other people being able to hear, understand, and appreciate alpha-ness when they are not alpha. That's the...
Well, actually, it's my thing. It's my theory about passive aggressives.
Well, short term, passive aggressive works in the short term. Can't build a business on it. But go on, Ed. I know you've got answers on
no, this is it. I love this area of conversation, because ultimately, to your point, Chris, what has been promoted 20 years ago in the 80s and onwards and so forth, that alpha male piece was a simple, quite clear route to success. So if you behave in an alpha male way, then you're more likely to climb the corporate ladder or climb whatever ladder, and everybody knew where you stood, and that was fine. What happens over time is that reaches, in my opinion, as far as it can go for what success is, or for what winning is. And actually, if we come back to the fact that we're all social beings and humans and working together to achieve a greater good, that's where I think in the business world now we're realizing that the alpha male role or profile has maxed out. So what does it look like to go further? Well, you need the other profiles. And therefore, we can't just promote the alpha male as the only profile to go. And that's where we get into our, leadership style, leadership voice, leadership profile. Because when it comes to winning in whatever you're doing, in the business world, in your home world, in your community world, ultimately, you need to be able to draw on all what we call the superpowers of each profile. And the alpha male was only one profile.
Yeah.
And where we're sitting now is at this crossroads, and I keep coming about this interjection, is we've maxed out. What do we do? Okay, we're talking about sustainability. We need to look after the world. Okay, well, who does that? And with all due respect, as an alpha male, you're limited in what you know. So the next thing is to say, actually, those who we call maturing their growth as knowing who they are, say, well, what else do I need to know? Let me call in some other profiles and be okay and vulnerable about that. So I don't have all the answers. I'm comfortable to say, can you share with me what the next step is? Because you still need the alpha male, to Jaz's point.
Yeah.
Thinking it through.
So I suppose my question is, what shift have you seen during the pandemic to now? Because it has been quite a period of change, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think the shift in the first place was led by fear. Like I said before, everybody wants things to be better. Nobody wants things to change. So you can't have one without the other. And the chaos and the conflict that came from that complexity of the world is not the same. Some people are great in that. They opt into complexity and it's like, yeah, let's navigate it. Other people actually really just need stability, and to lead through chaos from people who want trust, stability, hope and compassion is actually quite a unique way of meeting people where they are. And I've seen in the first instance, you see people who are not alpha, don't meet that profile, looking to their leader and actually seeing them saying, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where things are, but what I do know is I'm going to stand with you rather than do things to you or for you. And that caused a massive influx of emotional bank account loyalty. Like, oh my gosh, because people want to be led. We want to be led. I want to be led. Even when I was standing on stage in front of 20,000 people, I still want to be led in some way. So that change happened quite immediately. But as things went on and there was a continued, still don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to do this. Let's do this. Let's everyone turn your cameras on, which is great, apart from people in some parts of the world who are living in different circumstances, and turning your camera on is a real vulnerability piece, but wouldn't also speak up and say, That's not something we tend to do because they have a real culture of politeness. So you're putting people in a position without realizing it. And then that can cause tension in itself. So it's not the big things, it's not the big decisions, it's the tiniest things, it's the tiniest intentions and way of being that can have a huge impact that leads to disconnect. So the great resignation is a term which I don't like to use, but that feeling of people feeling, you know what, this company isn't for me, I'm not seen, I'm not heard, I don't matter anymore. That would be something that 30 years ago, it's like, what do you mean you don't matter? You've got a job, do it. Now is, well, I could go somewhere where I feel like I matter. It could be exactly the same, but I feel different. And it's the communication of the feeling from the alphas, who tend to be thinkers rather than feelers. They'll think first and feel second. And often people who are different profiles will have a higher feeling, will go with their gut before they go with processing and taking all the data on board. So that ability to be able to meet people where they are has become more important. And I think now what we've seen is leaders having to make decisions, and people making decisions based on that. And that's the tragedy of this. That's the sadness of this, is like the conversation that they both want to have is still the same, but because the void is so big, it becomes harder to have that conversation. And then what leaders are forced to do is start going, well, now we've got to do everything to try and keep people. They're forced into like a parent role. You haven't worked this hard and fought this long to be somebody's mum at work. Good grief. So the whole point is that you've got to find a way of common ground where you're not giving up everything you are and everything you know. You're using that as a harness to draw in and solidify that kind of joint focus and that joint, yes, we're going to do this together. That story that is told to your clients and also to the people within the company. And I can see that happening. But this is where authenticity and vulnerability have to be quite high, because in this day and age, in the digital age, superficiality it just doesn't wash. It just, you've got to really, if you say you are planting trees, we better see evidence of those trees being planted, otherwise I'm not buying your shoes. It's like the consumers are much more savvy in terms of the decisions they make, and we have to match that courageousness and authenticity and vulnerability at the same pace with clients and those who we love and lead. So I see that now we're at a really difficult space where the initial journey has kind of not been enough. You've had to change so much your tactic and the way you engage as a leader. And we're in a space now where it could be, how do we work in a state where there's stress, and how do we produce under pressure? How do we produce more under pressure in a way that before wasn't quite on that edge? And I think that's why we've seen such an uptake in what we're doing, certainly with my keynotes and with Ed's consultancy. The uptake has been very much in terms of, no, how do we win? How do we win in this situation? And it's that willingness, that's the vulnerability piece. It's that willingness to go, what do we need to upgrade? What do we need to recharge and refresh in order to pull people on board? But the leaders who are unable to do that, it just feels like you've gone as far as you can go. And aren't we watching companies, Ed, time and time again, where people are saying, well, look, it's, this has always worked, which is not evidence-based data. We've always done it this way. And it's just, you can see them going down, down, down. It's like, oh, we can't afford to lose you. Be better.
Your views?
It's that as well. So Jaz, add to that as well, because where we're seeing a lot of shift, and I was talking to our daughter actually, who's got a job in the hospitality side of things, and obviously there's a void at that level of individuals not wanting to go into hospitality, because there's and I think it's just an indicator of what is happening in other industries, but it's evident to see there. The reason why I think that's taking place is because one of the things I mentioned before is because there is this medley going on, and leaders are trying to work out, how do we establish, we're trying to keep people, what is it? Is it money? Is it this? Is it that? And missing everything that actually it's about purpose and what's your vision, and do you actually understand your people and all that? What appears to be happening is they're throwing, to Jaz's point, different things at it in the hope that one of them will land. And unfortunately, it keeps coming back to what Jaz mentioned, and we're seeing time and time again. I asked the question, who's in the room when you're making a decision about policy? Yeah. Who's in the room? If you have everybody nodding and saying it's just, yep, it's the right, then ultimately you're going to make the wrong decision about what you're doing for your people.
Yes. That happens again and again. You know, Samsung did an ad of a woman, it's like a watch, and they did a woman running at 2 o'clock in the morning in the city. And I'm like, whoa. And there was a massive backlash. Either there were no women there, or there were women there that didn't feel they could say something or said something, it got shouted down. And that conversation meant that when it came back with a load of women saying, running at 2 o'clock in the city, have you been out there dressed as a woman recently doing that? I can tell you it doesn't look like that. When that happened, the backlash wasn't, do you know what? You're right. We perhaps didn't have everyone's view on this. Thank you for that feedback. That's great. What we're going to do now is this, come on board. That wasn't it. It was, well, you know, we've done this and this is what it looks like. And that's where the struggle happens. It's like Radio 1 did it. They asked someone who was in Girls Aloud, Cheryl Cole, whatever her name is. They asked her to do a show on R&B. And there was this huge backlash from the R&B community. Why is a white woman talking about R&B? Well, of course, a white woman can enjoy R&B. But they were saying there's other artists. So what did the BBC do? We stand by our decision. It's like there's a moment there where you can get involved in a conversation or you can shut it down. And the thing that makes you look fantastic is the willingness to engage in a conversation. And the thing that makes you lose people is shutting it down. So for me, it's got to be this whole thing of how do we actually have those courageous conversations without giving up who we are and giving ourselves away. It's not about you becoming alpha, becoming beta. It's staying alpha and still pulling people in. So yeah, you're spot on, Ed, as usual. Ed's the sausage. I'm the sizzle. He's the sausage. He's where the meat is.
There was that one. Yeah, but actually, it is a problem though, isn't it? Because a lot of companies are struggling to, particularly in hospitality, to find a model where they can actually make money and start solving these problems. But at the same time, we're seeing a battle for staff, wages going up, inflation going up, the consumer asking more. It is very problematic because you're right. Alphas are often thinkers and then doers rather than communicators. So a lot of people are having to learn new tricks, aren't they? I mean, that's the real part of this.
But it's a new currency, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's rather than, sorry, babe, rather than competing on, we'll pay you more, or, you know, I don't know, we have better seats. It's the other thing that you can compete on. There are so many other things for staff. And when you have a story that is compelling, that isn't just the one that's your values that are 6 feet on the wall outside your organization. It's what I feel when I come into your hotel. It's what I notice in the touch points with people. It's the me as a consumer going, oh, people seem to love to work here. That's what is having that kind of extra frisson. So it's not just when people work for you, they're helping you achieve your dream. So what does their dream look like? And I've got a friend who's got a company in America who started doing Dream Day on Mondays. So people shared their dreams, and one was, well, I'd like to have a creche in the building because I have to go to nursery. Another one was, I want to play the piano. And then they hooked them up with someone, and each week they reported back on how is your dream going. Well, the turnover just it stopped. I mean, nobody left because suddenly they felt seen and heard. So that's a different way to compete on things, and we've seen companies really achieve with that and still make money. Of course, that's got to be the driving force. But you can't do that in a vacuum where you're having to convince people all the time that what they're doing matters. It's when their values and your values align in a way that isn't, you know, sign this contract to say you'll follow our values. That's actually got a lot of impact and makes a lot of difference. Go on, Ed, what were you going to say?
No, I mean, you've tied right into it, and we'll focus on that hospitality place, because to me, that's the big indicator at the moment, together with other areas of service, is if there is a concentration in your leadership team to say, how can we get to a point where the people in our company would stay even if we didn't pay them?
Yes, yeah, beautiful.
And that keeps it so, because here's the thing, that will keep you focused. Because actually, if it's not a financial transaction, then there must be other things. So what are those other things? And then to Jaz's point, and I keep coming back to, is who is in the room, because the different profiles of people, asking the people with different profiles will give you an insight into what I call the intrinsic driver for people. And if you manage to tap on all of those zones, you will now be not, you must go this way because this is my vision, but this is our vision. And actually, I bought into it because it may be your sustainability policy. It may be because you have a piano in the corner. It doesn't really matter what it is, but if there's a group of people that are in your company and actually you are working for their highest good and their intrinsic drivers, I can tell you, you focus on saying, what will it take for me not to, they wouldn't want money from me, and actually me paying them is a bonus for them.
It sounds a bit radical, doesn't it, when you say it? But Matthew Syed in Rebel Ideas wrote about, if you've got 10 people and you want 100 ideas, so you say, go and have 10 ideas each and come back. You should have 100 ideas at the end. But if those 10 people have all got the same, they're all called Tom, Dave, Kev, Mike, they've all worked in building, construction their whole life. They've all got the same flipping haircut, for crying out loud. You're going to have 10 ideas with slight variance. It's only when you go outside that and the FA did this, Gareth Southgate did this for football when England started to go on the rise again, asking not just the Beckhams of the world and the Hoddles of the world, but actually going to different industries and going to people who have no idea about what does it look like when teams really gel. Yeah. And that's
that's the real challenge, isn't it? Because one thing I've noticed, because I think we talked about this before, the average age of a chief exec has gone up 15 years and 15 years, which just tells you people stayed around longer. So the danger is you end up talking to the same people and creating your own narrative that never really moves on, because whatever happens, you've all got the same values and narrative.
Yeah.
Now the challenge is, how do we change that and open it up?
Well, good, we're growing talent. So it's not even about changing it. It's how do we sustain it? How do we build on it? How do we make it stronger? And we can't just all sit around waiting to die telling the same story.
Sure, but you'd be the first person to say there's 5 generations in the workplace. So let's build that narrative, understand that it's 5 generations.
I think, go on, babe.
I'll jump in there to your question there, Chris. How do we change that? The group of people that are in that space making those decisions are aware of each other. Yeah. And again, radical or non-radical will be like, all of it, we have to look at opening ourselves up and who else is in this space. Because I've done it many a times in boardrooms and rooms in the past. I've sat down and I've looked around and I said, we're all men. We're all men. There's an issue here. And if we're all men, then here's the thing. I'm not going to see something that someone else who's not a man is going to see. So my question is, once we've gone around each other and said, yeah, now we need to go, all right, we need to let other people in. Or we're all female, or we're all brown, or we're all white. And I'm not saying, this is a thing I think I get quite passionate about. I'm not saying, oh gosh, if we haven't got a disabled, left-handed individual in, then it's all wrong. It's not about that. It's saying that by definition, we are self-aware, and back to the awareness as a leader of who I am. I'm aware of who I am, and not just my limitations, but what I can see. And therefore, I'm maybe not aware of my blind spots, but how do I get people in a room to come and share those blind spots with me? Because they're only going to be able to they're going to be able to share with me what I can't see. And then that opens a conversation, in my opinion. It's who's in the room? Who's in the room when you're making these decisions?
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. Look, I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time. One thing I want to do is obviously start developing some workshops with you both, which we're going to go and engage, obviously, companies with. So I look forward to actually taking these conversations and evolving them and developing them far further. And I'm really seeing how we can do that forward. So may I just say thank you to you both for your time today.
Pleasure. Great talking to you.
Thank you for that.